Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining me on this presentation about how we go about building a wartime budget. Now, wartime budget is a phrase that we came up with to deal with how you spend your money during a time of complete economic uncertainty, similar to what we're going through at the moment. Now, I'm not sure of your exact circumstances, whether you've currently lost your job and you're having to rely on government support and you're in a position that you really never thought you'd be in, or possibly you're a little bit uncertain about the future. Maybe your income is stable for the moment, but how long that will continue for, you're not sure. So this is a way of spending and a way of planning around your money that will allow you to ride out the current economic storm. Because if we're honest, no one really knows exactly how long this is going to last. So we need to go to a process and to a budget that will be able to give you clarity on how much money you have, how much you have as a buffer, as a way of being able to get through this period. Whenever we do a budget, there's really three things that we want to make sure that it does for us. And that is that it gives us clarity, that it's easy to follow, and that it holds us accountable. Okay, it needs to give us clarity and it needs to be accurate. There's no point putting numbers in to a budget that aren't accurate because that will just steer the ship off track. And it needs to be easy to follow. As human beings, we're not particularly good at sticking to things that aren't comfortable for us or that we find arduous. If you only need to look at the example of gym memberships. At the start of the year, they spike and then they have a large drop-off rate. People continue to pay for them, but the drop-off rate is huge because it's uncomfortable for us. We don't like being taken out of our comfort zone. So we need to put something in place that's going to be easy for you to follow, easy for you to be able to do day in, day out, month after month, and that's sustainable. And finally, we want a form of spending that holds you accountable. Now, the reason we want to do this is because we're looking for large changes over the long term. But the way we go about doing that is by making small incremental changes from week to week. And particularly around a wartime budget, we want to make those small incremental changes so we can build a buffer to be able to ride this period out. So what's the first step? Well, obviously we've got to get the numbers down on paper on how you're spending at the moment and where your money's going. We've got a really good budget that we can help you with and provide you with. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But what you need to start with is go through your bank statements, look at the last 3 months, I would suggest, and put into different categories exactly where your money's going. The budget that we have will allow you to do that on a monthly, fortnightly, or weekly basis. And what it'll then do is give you an amount that you have, hopefully, in surplus at the end of the month. So once you've done the first step, completing a budget, we then go through that budget and we want to separate the essential from the non-essential items. And this is a really specific task we do when building a wartime budget. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to go through and work out exactly how much those essential items total. And that 3 to 6 month amount of essential items is going to be our target for our emergency buffer, which is a really integral part of a wartime budget. So these items you see on the left, we want to go through each month and see what they total, come down to the total, and if it's $2,000 and we want to set a goal for 3 months buffer, we want to have at least $6,000 as our target of what the buffer is we're going to aim for. Things on the right, the non-essential items, we know that they're things that we can go without during the times of a crisis. So the essential items are what we want to focus on. Because at the end of the day, we're going to build this emergency fund. And it's the emergency fund that's going to be able to get you and ride out the financial storm. What it's also going to do is it's going to give you peace of mind. I mean, there's nothing quite like putting your head down at the end of the day, knowing that you've got a financial buffer there that if you were to lose your income, you could survive the next 3 to 6 months. Especially when you take into account that we live in a really fortunate country that we do receive government support. Step 3, we're going to review areas to cut back and possibly reduce where possible. So these first items we've come up with are things that you can go through and speak to your providers and see if A, they can reduce your current policies, maybe by altering some things, or B, if you need to switch to another provider to save some money. Now, obviously, your mortgage is also going to be a really big part of that. We've now got variable rates at around 2.8%, and fixed rates are as low as 2.29%. So if you're paying over 3% on your mortgage, that is definitely a really good place to start, because your mortgage, for most people, is the largest debt that they'll have. So any small changes there in interest rate can actually be quite significant in monthly payments. Once we've looked at reducing areas, we then want to go through and just update our budget in the areas where we think we can cut back. So possibly groceries. I mean, it's amazing these days, and we hear it from so many of our clients as to how much we spend on food. So groceries are a really easy place to get a few quick wins and see if you can cut back on some areas. Entertainment subscriptions, they may be things you don't necessarily need, or you might even be paying 2 of them. We see people who often have subscriptions to Netflix and Stan and companies such as that when they're not really a necessity. Obviously, during a period like this, holidays and gyms memberships are things that will definitely not be a priority, and you might want to check that you aren't actually paying for your gym membership at the moment, given that all the gyms have closed. Internets and phones, again, these are things that we can look to cut back on. Clothing, again, something that is not usually a necessity during a time such as this. So we've gone through, we've reduced the expenses we can, we've cut back on areas. Now what we want to do is actually pay the minimum on existing debts. Now this would include your credit card as well. Usually we'd suggest trying to clear your credit card as quickly as possible, any credit card debt you have. But during a time of economic uncertainty, and when we're looking to build a wartime budget, we actually just want to go about paying the minimum on your credit card whilst we're building up that financial buffer. The financial buffer is the priority, because that is what is going to give you peace of mind, and it's what's going to be able to get you through should you lose your source of income. Once you've got your financial buffer, and once you're in a position where you feel like your income is fairly secure, by all means, we can then look at paying down credit card debt. Step 4, we want to set up your accounts into buckets. Now this is really powerful and something I use now myself and just find it so easy and so helpful. Your income, what it does is it comes into one main account, which we use for your bills. Any bills that are paid via direct debit or BPay get paid out of this account. And then what we do, based on the budget that you've completed, we give ourselves a weekly allowance for this everyday living account. And that out of that everyday living account, we spend things like groceries or petrol or coffees or lunches. Anything that we're spending items on where we're tapping and going, we spend out of this account. What we also want to do is build up our own emergency fund. So that would be done via a transfer out of your bills account. Once we've set that goal of exactly how much we need of 3 to 6 months of essential items. The long-term saving goals such as holidays and maybe children's education in the future, they would be things that I would hit the pause button on for now and just put on hold until we've built up this emergency fund. As I said, that's our priority. Now, I know when I use this, I don't have an ATM card or a debit card for my bills account because I just don't need it. When the bills come in, I pay it online or it's a direct debit, it's done, it's forgotten about. All I focus on is this everyday living account. Week to week, that's all I'm looking at on my banking app to check that I'm staying within that weekly allowance. And what it does is it just gives you that sense of accountability for those discretionary expenses that you just may not need to buy. Do you really need that extra coffee? Do you need to go out for lunch or can you eat at home? Do you need to go out for dinner, etc.? So that is just so powerful and it will just simplify your life to no end. So how do we know exactly what the difference is between bills and everyday living? Well, your bills, as I said, are fixed items and they're paid via usually direct debit or BPay. Your everyday living items, are paid via tap and go via a card, and they're things that usually can fluctuate. So that's the power, and by giving ourselves a weekly allowance, that just holds us accountable, as I said earlier. Now, just going back, the reason that we want to build up the surplus in this account is because this is the account we're not touching. So as savings build up, we want it either in the bills or our emergency fund. We don't want it in this everyday living account. We just want to stick to the budget and the allowance we've given ourselves. If a surplus was to build up here in this account, it's likely for most of us that we're going to be inclined to spend it. So we've separated our bills and our everyday living, and the final step is just to automate our payments and review them on an ongoing basis. You'll be setting up a weekly allowance, as I said, to your everyday living account. You want to make sure that's realistic. We don't want a case where you've got more than enough money you need and you're overspending, but by the same time, we don't want you getting to the end of the week and realising that you don't have enough. I know for me, the most powerful thing about this is traditionally I would have everything in one account, and what I would find is I'd have plenty of money at the start of the month. That's when I would overspend, because in my head I thought, oh, I've got more than enough, I've got plenty, I can make these additional purchases, I'll be fine. And what would happen is you get to towards the end of the month and you realise, oh geez, I don't have as much money in my account as I thought I would, but it's at the end of the month, so it's too late. So what you've got to do is, the really important part is by making this a weekly transfer, and that just makes it so easy to follow and hold you accountable. So a big part of what we do is we run our mortgage-free program. But a mortgage-free program and becoming mortgage-free starts with a really sound budget. And that's what we've tried to show you today, is how to build a wartime budget and an emergency fund in times of economic uncertainty. If you'd like a copy of the budget, or you'd like us to walk you through as to how to set this up, please get in touch with us. You can phone me directly, and we'd be more than happy to walk you through these steps. Thank you.